I don't know if this is on. Thank you. I don't know if Brian Shoemaker is in the room. There he is. He's raised his hand. Brian Shoemaker is the new Assistant Executive Director of Kentucky Right to Life. And Brian, we welcome you. He just started working with us about 2 weeks ago. And so far he's doing a pretty good job, I think. I don't want to make a pun about his last name, but he's been doing so much walking in and out of newspaper offices and schools that shoe leather might be better name at this point. But anyway, thank you, Brian. Welcome on board. And then we have Representative Joe Fisher on my far left. Sorry about that term. He's one of our leading legislators and has been since the first day or first year he walked into the state capitol. So Joe, thank you for coming. And some of our other legislators are either here and I don't see them, or they will be coming soon. Rest assured they will be here. And then we have our next speaker. There's the wonderful Ann McElhinney. I hope I said that right, Ann.
It's all good.
All the way from California, and the author of the book Gosnell, and I will give a little spiel on Ann before she comes up to the microphone. Ann McElhinney is an author, journalist, film producer, and director. She and her husband, journalist Philip McAleer, wrote the bestseller Gosnell, the untold story of America's most prolific serial killer. And as I mentioned earlier, her book is over on the table, and she will autograph that book for you, which is going to be really something to bring home with you. The couple, working with Magdalena Segreta, produced the Gosnell movie, which they financed with a massive crowdfunding campaign that raised $2.25 million in just the first 45 days. In 2009, Ann McElhinney produced and directed Not Evil, Just Wrong, a film that examines the devastating consequences of global warming hysteria. Boy, I don't know what happens when you get to this microphone. She has often been interviewed on radio broadcasts such as the Dennis Prager Show, the Hugh Hewitt Show, and the Dennis Miller Show. Mrs. McElhinney will show excerpts from the film, Gosnell, as she did at the National Right to Life Conference in July in Milwaukee. And her bio is in the folder that you all received when you came in. And now it does give me great pleasure to introduce you to Ann. Thank you very much.
Okay, we had some technical issues earlier, and I'm hoping we don't have any more technical issues. There she is. It'll be okay. I'm sure it'll be fine. No? Is that? No. Oh yeah, it's all good. It's looking very good. Yes. Good morning. I kind of thought of starting here with this. Do any of you remember watching the film Schindler's List? Yes. Yeah. So they did a very clever thing in that movie, a cinematic thing, where it was all in sepia tinted. It was all black and white. The whole film was black and white. And there was only one piece of color. And the one piece of color was this piece with this child wearing a red coat and being walked along by the Nazi guards. And you kind of watched it and you kind of thought, oh, that's pretty, whatever. And you never really, you thought, that's odd. Why is there suddenly color just for this one thing? And of course it became really significant at the end of the film, when many of you know what happened when one of the camps was liberated. And you saw a pile of bodies, and in the pile of bodies you saw the red coat. And you realized the significance of it. And I think the reason why Spielberg did that was that in the numbers, in vast, vast numbers of dead, it's very hard, it becomes very, very hard to empathize, because it becomes too big to manage to think of. So millions of babies dead is very hard to get your head around. It's very, very difficult. And I think, you know, somebody just said there at coffee, what do we do? How do we, how does something change? What's going to happen here to make something change? I think the only thing that's going to make things change is culture, and is storytelling. It was kind of funny when Margie was making the introduction and talking about the devastating effects of global warming, and then she paused, and I was thinking, oh my God, this audience are going to start throwing things at me. Of global warming hysteria. I used to be a liberal, and I like to say, I used to be a liberal, but I'm okay now. And the reason I'm not a liberal anymore was because of one story as a journalist that I covered, where I saw it, where the blinkers came off, where I saw everything very clearly. So before I ever heard of Gosnell, I was what's called neutral on abortion. And for those of you who don't know what neutral on abortion means means pro-abortion. Yeah, so you already know that, so I didn't need to translate it for you, but I didn't know that until I got involved in this story. And I think what this story offers, the gift of this story, which is a very weird thing to say, is the details. The movie doesn't do the details really. The book does the details, and it really does the details. And I think that's what's important about the book, is recording the history of what happened in this country, not in some backwater, not some 2 centuries ago, but in this country, in this century, in progressive Pennsylvania, in the sanctuary city of Philadelphia, the city of brotherly love. What happened? And what happened for a really, really long time. So the details, I think the details, it's all in the details. And the details are what changes people. And just listening to what Wesley said as well, there's a culture of death. And the only answer to the culture of death is that there would be a culture of life, and that the culture of life would happen in the culture. I think one of the biggest faults I have with conservatives, and I never meet anyone who's conservative enough for me. I find everyone ridiculously middle of the road. But conservatives don't take culture seriously at all. Not at all. And liberals take it very, very seriously, and they make very, very sure that all their messages are everywhere. Like everywhere. In cookery shows, they don't leave anything out. On music shows, you're listening to NPR, listening to a jazz, and they'll just get it in there. They'll just get a message in there about something. They take this very seriously, and they're really, really good at it. What I don't understand is that all the best stories are on our side. We have all the best stories, but we just don't tell them. This is a good story. It's a good story because it talks about the value of life in a very strange way. In a very, very strange way. I'm not trying to explain that. One of the things I need to always remind myself to do with audiences, even audiences like you, is to remind you of who Kermit Gosnell was, because it's amazing to me many people don't know. Kermit Gosnell is serving 3 life sentences in a prison in Pennsylvania for severing the necks of children born alive in a clinic in Philadelphia. He's serving 3 life sentences for 3 children, but according to the grand jury who heard evidence for over a year, there is absolutely no doubt that he did this to thousands of children over a span of 30 years, where he was able to operate with complete impunity because the authorities couldn't care less. And here's another quick one of why it is we're conservatives, or I'm going to presume most of you are conservatives, I hope, whatever, that I'm a conservative. Conservatives have an issue with big government. If ever you needed an argument for what's wrong with big government, this is exactly where you find it. Right here. There was no end of government in Pennsylvania. There was all kinds of government. Tons and tons and tons of government. And by the way, tons and tons and tons of law. It makes no difference. It made no difference in this case. In this clinic that he ran in Philadelphia, in West Philadelphia, he employed these people here. And he was very smart. He's a very smart guy. He's very manipulative. And he employed people that he could control. So he employed people who were either, had a combination, a cocktail, if you like, of drug addiction, alcoholism, sexual abuse, multiple abortions, foster care, huge cocktail of problems in their past. These are people who could never get a job in the real world, ever. No one would ever employ them. Jim Wood, who's the police officer who eventually put Gosnell behind bars, said, you wouldn't let them mow your lawn. But these people administered anesthesia and treated women, and did that for years, for decades, in the progressive state of Pennsylvania. Doing the research for this story, I mean, the stories are just extraordinary. And for me, on a personal note, the worst part of all of this for me was Steve Massoff. This guy, who does not feature in the movie. We left him out. Steve Massoff, and the reason I think Steve Massoff is worse than anyone else is because Steve Massoff is not like those women who had these awful backgrounds. Steve Massoff was from a nice family, from a good family. He was one of those guys who couldn't get into medical school in America, so went, to the Caribbean, the way you do that, and then came back and couldn't get a residency here, so he was working in a pub. And for those of you who are religious, it's interesting, if you believe in God, you really have to acknowledge the opposite. And if God is powerful, the opposite's powerful too. And it's really extraordinary how the hand of evil was working here. He's working in a pub, and he accidentally meets a guy, and the guy he accidentally meets is somebody who knows Gosnell, and who knows that Gosnell is short-handed. And so he got a job working for Gosnell and getting to be a pretend doctor, even though he had never done a residency. And when he took the stand, what he said is the worst thing I've ever read anywhere. So he said, so he's under oath, right? He's under oath, he's under pain of perjury if he were to tell a lie, and he's asked to describe what it's like in the clinic. And I have all the details in the book. He said, I was a fireman in hell. I ran with scissors. There were just so many of them. He said that the walls, that the blood ran down the walls. At one point, he actually asked the judge, he said, indulge me. He said, just feel there at the back. You see that? Feel that. And the judge said, could the court stenographer take a note here that he's indicating the back of his neck and asking us to feel for the soft piece of the back of the neck? That's where we cut. He spoke like that all the time when he was on the stand. He's serving 15 years, by the way, and I've written to him and he didn't write back. Interestingly enough, actually, because everyone else did. So all of the workers, by the way, went to prison. I don't know if you knew that. So all the people who worked for Gosnell went to prison, including his wife. This is his wife, Pearl Gosnell. She's signaled out in the grand jury testimony because so he operated this clinic, mostly him coming at night, because during the day he was working in Delaware at another clinic. But he also opened the clinic on Sundays when none of the other workers came in, and he worked with Pearl. And the description of that in the grand jury report is that they did the more difficult cases on Sunday. And these were the third trimester abortions, late second and third trimester abortions that he did with her. And there's no doubt that happened. And the grand jury very, very poignantly to me, said, we will never know. We may never know how many children died there because the files were destroyed and the remains of the children were also taken off the premises. But the workers who came in on Monday all reported that they saw the residue of the fact that there had been a lot of work done the previous day. Here's two of the, just to give you an idea of the kind of people here. So Sherry West and Linda Williams. So these are the two, some of you who do know the case will remember that two women died also. Two women died at the clinic, Karnamaya Monger, a Bhutanese refugee who had spent 20 years in a refugee camp in Nepal, only to come to America and be dead 4 months later after an abortion at Gosnell's clinic. She was treated during a very long period of a day by these two. Both of them who have an opioid addiction and have one of them is bipolar. You know, they have all of that going on. And this is who treated this woman, Carnamaya Monger. And one of the most awful parts of the Carnamaya Monger story for me is that Carnamaya Monger didn't speak English. And by the way, I was writing this book and working on this story for a really long time until this one detail jumped out at me. This is why I say the details are really important. Who knows what detail will have an impact on you or someone else. But so she's been medicated all day, and as the day goes on, there's a moment where she starts to put up a fuss, is how Linda Williams described it. And Linda Williams phoned Gosnell at home. He was at home. And said, she's putting up a fuss. And the answer was, med her up, which meant fill her up with Demerol. And they did that, and you know, and she obviously eventually died from a drug overdose. But what struck me was she put up a fuss. And I'm thinking, this is a woman who lived with a tin hut roof in a refugee camp in Nepal for 20 years. Arrived in America, you know, in America, the American dream, you know, this amazing country, which is an amazing country, and ended up in this place, in this clinic, and looked around. There's cats walking around. There's cat feces on the floor. In the corridors, people urinate because the toilets are backed up with human remains. And she put up a fuss. And you know what struck me? She thought, oh my God, I'm going to die here. And she thought, I need to get out of here. So she was struggling to get out of there, and she couldn't speak English. And in the sanctuary city of Philadelphia, no one gave a damn. She was dead and buried, and nothing. There wasn't a police report. There wasn't a police report. The health department in Carlsberg didn't bother getting off their backsides to go and check out what's going on in the sanctuary city of Philadelphia. For all the sanctuary city people, they couldn't care less about her. And the only reason that we know her name, and that her name will be remembered, is because of one great cop, Jim Wood, who was not doing his job. His job was undercover narcotics. But once he heard about her death, he became obsessed with her. And Christine Wexler, the ADA on this case, said, and I have it quoted at the very beginning of the first chapter of the book, this whole case exists only because of Jim Wood. He was Carnamaya Monger's champion. He was the only one. He's just a great guy. I'm friends. We're very big friends. He has a boat, apparently, in Wildwood. I'm going to visit sometime when I get a break. And then there's Adrienne Moten. So Adrienne Moten is the girl who famously, she's one of the people who famously took a photograph of baby boy A. Some of you know that baby boy A is very much central to this case. Baby boy A is one of the children who is the reason that Gosnell is in prison. And Adrienne Moten, the day he was born, he was so big and he was alive that he had such an impact on the workers that a number of workers took a photograph of him, including Adrienne Moten. And actually, sorry, I meant to read this actually. Thank you. That's my book. No, that's your book. You can keep your book. But I just thought, it's just an amazing, her story is amazing actually. Can you ask that man to just stop talking? So when she got arrested, she says, I'm so glad I got arrested. I don't feel like I got arrested. I feel like I got rescued. And when the cops came, she said to them, she said, oh, you're going to need this. And she gave them a phone, an old phone that she had kept, and she hadn't thrown it out. And you know where you change your phone and you throw out the old phone? She didn't throw out the phone, she kept the phone. And that phone contained the images of baby boy A, which are on the internet, by the way, for anyone who wants to look at them. And she said, I mean, it's just incredible. I just wanted to not say it incorrectly, because I want to say exactly what she said. I took the picture, she told us. I remember coming home, I showed it to my mother, and I said, the doc has lost his mind, this is ridiculous. She knew the photo represented a madness that was present at 3801 Lancaster Avenue, and she also had a feeling that it was going to be important someday. I never got rid of that phone. To be honest, I just couldn't get rid of it. I had a feeling that this was going to come to the surface. I just didn't know when. So when the police came, I gave them the phone. I said, there's a picture in there. Do whatever you have to do with it, because now I'm free of it. I'm free. So they sent that phone to Quantico to retrieve the photograph. And the photograph became very significant in the case. And anyone who wants to see it, all you have to do is go on Google and put in baby boy A in Gosnell, and you'll see it. But by the way, just understand that you don't get to unsee it either. And one thing I always say when I come to, no matter who I speak to, I'm not showing any photographs here. And I often get people very happy about that. It's not people don't have to look at photographs. Not everyone's up for it. Not everyone's fit for that. And some people really like looking at photographs, and that's great. But not everyone wants to. I think that information is actually just bad enough, and you can conjure it up in your mind. But that child lived and died on July the 12th, 2008, and shares a birthday with my father. Isn't that weird? July the 12th. But he was just, and it's funny, my husband has a great, I just think my husband has a great expression. He says, you could live a very long life and not do anything remarkable. You know what I mean? Not do anything remarkable with your life. This child, who lived for a very short time on July the 12th, 2008, will do something remarkable and has already done something remarkable because he has changed people's minds about abortion just by his life and death. And I think that's very powerful because in the end, what he represents is what's legal. It's legal in America to kill him. And the fact that he was killed outside the womb rather than inside the womb is just geography. During the trial, some of the testimony was just unbelievable, and this is one of the most one of the ones that I think is extraordinary. Now I can't read it, you see. Yes, I asked him, "What's the sex of my baby?" So she goes for an abortion. She's a young woman. Testifies her abortion. She was 15 at the time and received no counselling. Okay, I'm going to have to do this. Hang on. See, this is what happens when you get a certain age and you can't see anything with either any set of glasses. Yes, I asked him, "What's the sex of my baby?" And he told me, "If I'm good enough, I can know." But he never told me. Why did you want to know the sex? Because that could have made me think like, well, I don't know, just wanted to know. Could have made you think, what, Shanice? It's okay. I still wanted to keep her. If I would have known more about the situation, I would have definitely made my decision on what I wanted to do, and I would have talked it over with my mom, because my mom had said to me, "Are you comfortable? Are you sure?" So, were you comfortable? Are you sure about your decision? No. You never found out what the sex of your baby was? No. And there was a lot of testimony like that at the trial. Tina Baldwin was one of the workers at the clinic, and she's famous because she brought her daughter to work, and her daughter was 15 at the time, and she got her daughter of 15 a job at the clinic. Her daughter, Ashley Baldwin, in the eyes and in the judgment of the two ADAs, Joanne Pescatorian and Christine Wexler, both of them said if it weren't for Ashley Baldwin, there would have been a lot more dead people. And Ashley Baldwin of 15 was the chief anaesthetist in the clinic. And she used a cheat sheet, which was actually shown in evidence, and we have it at the end of the movie. She made a little cheat sheet. I have to be very careful how I say that. A cheat sheet, so that she could try and remember doses. So she'd look at people and she'd say, "Oh, maybe a bit of red, and maybe a bit of red and a bit of pink for her." And of course, if any of you, I know somebody here was you're a physician. I mean, anyone who's in the medical profession will understand anesthesia is unbelievably complicated. Like, red-haired people have completely different makeup in terms of anesthesia than the rest of the population. Asians are different, etc. And of course, Asians are different. And Asians, as you can imagine, Asians are different. And guess what? Of course, Cardi Monger was Asian. And obviously, the two that were working that day, first of all, didn't know that anyone was different to anyone else. They couldn't even weigh her because the weighing scale was broken. But Ashley Baldwin, anyway, they're lucky that they had the 15-year-old there, because she took it very seriously. She was very scared of killing someone. So when she was given anesthesia, she was very, very super, super careful. And Tina Baldwin was actually, along with all the other charges leveled against Tina Baldwin, she was also charged with, bringing a minor into an immoral activity, or whatever, whatever that phrase is there. And I'm actually going to flick past that because I literally cannot read it because I have definite glasses issue today. This is a picture of a cat taken by the police at the clinic during the raid, and those cats walked around. And it's funny, when I met Gosnell, so I interviewed Gosnell in prison for 3 hours, and I mentioned the cats to him at one point. And I mean, he just has an answer for everything, and he's an incredible liar. And one of the things he said about cats, oh no, we got the cats, and he, kind of quite proud, oh yeah, we got the cats because we had a real problem with rats. As many of you know, one of the big stories out of this was the fact that the media didn't cover the case. And it's like, just from what I've said so far, the idea that that isn't newsworthy is beyond belief. That none of what I've said so far is newsworthy, that wasn't worthy of being front page news in the United States of America, that this had happened in America, that 2 women had died in a clinic in America, and the health department in that state didn't go and investigate. Not even that they didn't investigate, they didn't turn up at the clinic to check things out. These are the same health departments that close nail salons. These are the same health departments that close restaurants, go into bars where people are trying to make a little bit of a living, and go in and go, uh-oh, I think we got some dust here. It's the same people. These people are despicable. By the way, I have a thing, which I say to every audience. I kind of get Gosnell. I think he's a psychopath, and he got away with murder. But I have a much, much, much more difficult time dealing with nurses at the Department of Health who have a nursing training, and who knew that a woman died, a vulnerable woman, and a refugee, and they wouldn't leave their office in Harrisburg to find out what happened to her. They're beyond despicable. And every one of them should have been sacked, and every one of them should have lost any kind of retirement benefits that they had, because they did not do their job. Just despicable. One of the things I need to always remember to do when I'm doing these speeches is to tell you something good. Are you ready for something good? This is my picture for the one, what I call the one that got away. So there was a girl, so during the grand jury testimony of the trial, the grand jury sat for a really long time, for like over a year. And I don't know if many of you understand what a grand jury is, and it's secretive and all of that. And it's the regular people of the public are there, and they have to have a quorum of about 38 or something like that. And it's women with their shopping, and people, students, and all kinds of people are in there. And people are knitting, and have their all this kind of stuff. And they're all in there, and they listen to this stuff, unfiltered, for a really long time, to try and work out if there's something indictable, if an offence has occurred. And this was a confusing case, by the way. So there was an enormous amount of stuff that they had to go through. Even the prosecutors were very confused, and had to all they were looking up medical books at night and stuff. I mean, it's an incredible story, the story of the ATAs on this case, and the police officers and the CSI guys. So then this woman turns up at the grand jury, and she's being asked, who are you, what's your name, and whatever. And she said, I went for an abortion at Gosnell's clinic. And she was very pregnant. She was a late-term abortion. And you're all experts, you know this, but for anyone who maybe has just arrived today, I'll just tell you, it goes on for 3 days in a late-term abortion. It's a 3-day procedure. So it starts with putting in the seaweed that makes, for the dilation. And then they go home, then they come back for more, then they come back, and then the 3rd day it's done. So this woman went the first day and was getting the sticks in, and she sort of, whatever consciousness raising was coming to her, and obviously being in that clinic itself obviously is arresting. She said, what happens to the babies afterwards? And he said, oh, we burn them. And she went home and she was disturbed, and she spoke to her cousin and said, whatever. And then Christine Wexler, who's speaking to her on the stand, said, the cousin said, and Gosnell said to the cousin, you're not getting your money back, and we don't do reversals. And then Christine Wexler said to her, what happened then? And she went, my baby started kindergarten today. And the grand jury, for the first time in anyone's memory, stood up and applauded. Because they'd heard so much shit for a year, there was the first good thing that they could hang on to. And when I heard that story, the first time I heard that story, I said that is going to be the center point of our movie. And it is. We've slightly changed it for a reason, just a dramatic reason, but you'll see it in the movie and you'll understand. But here's do you want to get to the crazy bit? Can somebody tell me how I'm doing for time? I always don't ever know about time. What does that say then?
10:52.
And when do I stop? 8 minutes. I think it's 8 minutes. Oh no. Oh, I did it. Great, let's get some context. So then we make this movie, and we're in Oklahoma City, and we don't have an actress to play this role, which turns out it's a small role in the end, right? It's a small role, whatever, anyway, you'll see it. And we don't have an actress, and the director of the film is in an IHOP and sees a girl and thinks, you can do it. And of course, it's a funny scene actually, because he sort of says, you know, I'm making a movie, do you want to be in my movie? And she's like going, yeah. Like you're the first guy who's making a movie. What, do you want to go back to your apartment so we can talk about it? And he said, no, I'm not going to be that guy. I'm going to bring the script back down and you can, whatever. So then they brought the script back down, whatever. You know, she turns out she came and became the girl who played this role. And in a movie, you don't shoot in sequence. You shoot in whatever way is cheapest, right? So you do a lot of scenes at the one time if you're in the one spot. So the last scene in the movie is the first thing shot. It's the first thing we shot with her. And she's the last thing you see in the movie. She's the last person you see in the movie. And I met her and we're chatting and it's all great. And nice, very nice girl, right? And then the next scene we're doing with her is the scene in the grand jury. And so she's there and I'm there, and there's a whole crowd of people because we have a massive crowd for the grand jury because obviously you need loads and loads of extras and everything, so it's quite busy. And then she sees me and she goes, oh my God. So I go over and she says, oh my God, I've read the script now. This is my story.
Oh, geez.
And I said, what do you mean? And she said, I was having an abortion in Houston. And she said she had her clothes off and she's lying on the bed and the nurse came in and the nurse said to her, here, listen to your baby's heartbeat. I'm actually going to go out, I've got to do some things and then I'm going to come back.
Yeah.
And then she left her alone. And this girl says, and I just listened to my baby's heartbeat. And I just put my clothes back on and I just got out of there and I went into the car and I said to my granddaddy, I said, we're going home. And he said, let's go. So I walk away from this girl and I tell my husband, you will not believe what that woman just told me. And he says, go back and ask her, could you interview her? Could you interview her? And so I did. And I'm going to show you the interview because it's really worth seeing. And we're just going to hope that the technology works.
My name is Tessa Watley. I'm playing Viola Brown in the Gosnell movie.
My voice will be in this, so just don't say yes or no. So you just spoke to me earlier today. Why is this role important to you?
I actually symbolize with my character. I also was young and pregnant at once. I went in to actually abort my baby, and the nurse had let me hear my son's heartbeat. That's also something they're not supposed to do. But she let me hear the heartbeat of my baby, told me that was my baby's heartbeat, and said she'd be back to go ahead and do the procedure. So as I laid there for about maybe 4 or 5 minutes, she came in and said she'd be right in, and I laid there and I just started crying and decided it was something I couldn't do. I couldn't kill my baby. So I put my clothes on, I went out to my grandpa, told him I couldn't do it. He said, let's go. And I just feel I very much symbolize with my character in this, and my baby is now 6 years old.
Right, who are you playing in this film?
Viola Brown.
And what happened to Viola Brown?
She also went through the same thing. She decided not to go through the abortion, and she had her baby, and her baby is 5 years old.
What would you say to girls that are in the same situations? What would you say to them?
If you have that opportunity and you decide